Hey everybody, in this video I'm going to show you a simple and quick adjustment that you can make to the bow arm if you're having any discomfort to help relieve some of those symptoms. This is a minor adjustment that you can make to the bow arm position regardless of what type of archer you are. So whether you shoot a compound bow, a bare bow, an Olympic recurve, or any other type of bow, what we are going to do to relieve discomfort in and around the shoulder, if you have some, is change the amount of rotation that your humerus is sitting in, meaning that your arm meets the socket of the shoulder blade, and based on how that ball is sitting in the socket, we can make a slight tweak by rotating the arm bone and maintaining that amount of rotation to find what is most comfortable for you. So depending on what type of irritation you have, what structures are irritated, where your discomfort is, that small tweak in rotation will provide comfort. Now there's two big keys to this. The first is that there is some experimenting that has to occur, meaning that we have to play with the amount of rotation that that arm bone is sitting in. Evaluate how you feel, if that's helpful, harmful, or no change. And then once you find a position that you feel may be helpful in relieving some of your symptoms, you have to give it time. Meaning that for some individuals, it might be an immediate change and an immediate relief in that discomfort in those symptoms. In others, it may take more time. The marker that we're going to look at for this tweak is where the tip of the elbow is pointing. Now, what's really important to understand is we're not necessarily all that worried about where the elbow is pointing in regards to the position of the elbow. Rather, the point of the elbow tells us how much that arm is rotated and where we are. Meaning that some archers are going to feel better with their elbow pointing a little bit down. Other archers are going to feel better with their elbow tip pointing a little more out. So when we look at that marker of the elbow tip, we're trying and seeing, okay, does that elbow tip feel better when it's pointing down because we've changed the amount of rotation that that arm has while sitting in the socket, or does it feel better turned a little bit more out? It's also important to understand that we don't want to get excessive with this, meaning that we don't want the elbow tip to be pointing up. We don't want the elbow tip to be pointing all the way straight down. It's typically going to be somewhere in the middle of pointing out and slightly down, and there's a spectrum there that we can work within. Now let's look at the adjustment. I'm going to show you with my bare bow, but again, you can do this with any type of bow that you are shooting. The key is when we make this, we now have an immovable object that I can adjust the amount of rotation of that arm as you see here. So I want to keep my grip the same. It's important to understand we're not changing the grip. We're still setting the grip however you ideally like to have it. But as you watch the change in the amount of rotation, here I'm pointing a little bit more down, here I'm pointing a little bit more out, and I can find everywhere in between. So when you go to shoot, pick one of those. Pick a position, whether that's the elbow tip pointing slightly more down, slightly more out. So if I start with it slightly more down, then I'm going to execute some shots evaluating how I feel and what my symptoms are like, whether they improved, whether it didn't make a difference, made them worse, and then we can alter and adjust. Now remember, you are going to have to consider some other variables as far as any clearance that you're looking for in your forearm, the ability to maintain the grip you want. There are some other variables that are going to come into play here when you're adjusting how much rotation you have in that arm. However, if we're thinking about the priority of finding more comfort for you and less pain in that shoulder, that's what we're prioritizing when we make this change. Then we can worry about those other variables and try to make those fit and work for you while we again find that ideal amount of rotation that feels better in your shoulder joint, around that shoulder joint, based on the amount of rotation in that arm that you choose. Again, looking at that marker of where that elbow tip is pointing, keeping that consistent, evaluating how you feel, and making adjustments as needed to ultimately get your shoulder to a place where it feels best for you if you're having that discomfort in that joint of the bow shoulder. That should give you a baseline to start working on making that small adjustment to see if you can get comfort in that shoulder if you're experiencing pain. What I want to make sure that is clear is that we need to remember everybody is a little bit different, meaning that when we look at the structure of the ball at the end of the humerus in the socket of the shoulder, we're considering so many different variables there as far as differences in anatomy, differences in function of this joint, differences in the physiology with how these structures work, past injuries, maybe you had a potential surgery in the past. There's a lot of different things we have to consider. So instead of trying to fit everybody in one box where everybody has a different shoulder, we're making those small tweaks to see if we can provide you with more comfort. Now, I'll emphasize it is small and it is a slight change. So again, we're not making giant changes to this bow shoulder. We're still making sure that we keep that bow shoulder solid and down and anchored, and then just making sure that we can work towards a more comfortable shot. I hope you found this video valuable and helpful. If you did, subscribe to the channel for more information, education, and tips. And if you're interested in training and diving deeper, or even working with me individually, you can visit archerystrong.com. Thank you for your support.